Hi guys, and welcome to video 3 of the Unity 2019 tutorial series. Now what we did in the last Workspace demo, I'll just bring this up and open up Unity. What we did in the last Workspace demo was we were looking at how you can add and create 3D objects using the menu system down the left hand side, and then using the hierarchy and the inspector panel we could manipulate what's known as a transform, the X, Y and Z position and coordinates inside the world, to manipulate the object in the scene itself in the center. So we were having things like a cube in the center. If I just zero this out for a second, there we go. And if I click on my main camera, we were looking at how a cube can basically be positioned and moved around using the tools either up here, selecting the objects in the hierarchy or on the scene, and then we would manipulate the position, rotation and scale using the transform component. Now, to continue this Workspace 101, the next panel that I want to show you is the animation panel, because before we jump into the code side where we'll be looking at the basics of C#, the popular programming language, or even JavaScript if you're more comfortable with that, I want to show you how Unity has some inbuilt tools to be able to rotate, scale and move around an object without touching any code at all. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to need is the animation panel. Now if you come up to Window, the animation panel is now situated underneath this animation category, and we have the animation there. Now if you're using an older version of Unity, just keep going down the list, as the layout has slightly changed and it used to be a little bit lower down in the list. But for everyone else, click animation and this will present us with the animation panel. Now mine is docked across the bottom, but you guys may have it appear in the center like so. Now to move it around, all you have to do is click this little tab in the corner, the same as any of these panels, and you can click and position the animation panel wherever you want. I like mine to be sat down next to the console down at the bottom here, as I like to see the timeline going across the screen like so. And just like a camera's film, we can see the timeline of 0 up to however many seconds we want on the animation running across the screen. So at 0, we're ready to play the animation, and then these numbers here represent seconds, and as they go across the screen, the animation will automatically be created for us and the frames will be filled out. But how do we do that? Okay, now the first thing I want you to do is click on the object you want to animate, and I want to make this cube spin a little, move round and maybe change the scale. So when you select an object and you come down to the bottom here, you can see that you can now create your first animation. So let's do that. Let's create the animation. I'm going to pop mine in a new folder for my animations, just to keep things nice and neat. And I'm going to call my animation cube anim. Doesn't really matter what you call it, as long as you remember for later on if you ever want to access it. Now what's happened is the timeline has suddenly become active, and if we use the mouse button I can scroll in and out and see more or less seconds going across. Now to create an animation, all we have to do is click the record button on the left hand side, and this will activate the timeline in edit mode and we're ready to animate our object. So right at the start, what I want to do is set the current position. So before I do anything, I'm going to just make sure that everything's zeroed, as I was playing around with position of my cube a little bit. And I'll just get rid of this for a second, just so that yours looks the same. Oh, hang on, let me do that again, 1 second guys. There we go, and now record. Now we should be exactly the same as you guys. So at 0, if you need to add a keyframe, what you do is click Add Property, and this will present us with the 3 different options, and we want to manipulate the transform. So what I want you to do is click Transform, and the first thing that we're going to manipulate is the rotation. So click the little plus symbol. And what that's done is it's created a start position keyframe and an end position keyframe. On the left hand side here, we can see how many frames per second the animation will play at. And most games run at a target frame rate of between 30 and 60 frames. Anything higher than that and you're getting a really nice smooth gaming experience. On a mobile, if you aim for 30, then you're doing well. Now, we'll leave it where it is for now at 60 frames per second as it's nice and smooth. And what I want to do is just rotate the cube a little bit. So if it starts at 0 and ends at 0, how about at about 0.2 seconds, we rotate the cube slightly. So if I want to rotate on the y-axis, going through the top, so I twist the pole and the cube spins horizontally, then let's change this y-axis to about 90 degrees. There we go. And what you can see already is if I click and drag, starting at 0, the animation has been created for us for that transition. Now, let's say at 40, we want to go to about 270 degrees. So the distance between the keyframes is the same, but the distance traveled is further. That means that what will happen is the animation will happen quicker. Here we go, look, so as we go through there, and then look, you can see the animation will speed up much more to complete the rotation. And back to the end, let's put this to say 360 or 350 will do, which will give us a nice transition back. Maybe even 340 will probably look better, as there's normally a delay when we hit the end of the transition while it jumps back to the first keyframe. So having it just off the perfect 0 position will fill in the void at the end. And to see this animation actually work now, what we can do is click play. So if we click play, we can see that the cube is in fact rotating and spinning at the different speeds and the different amounts that I've just created. So let's leave that alone and unpause. What about if we want to make the object also scale in size? Well, let's come back to 0 on the timeline, and about halfway, let's go for 30, there we go. I'm going to add another property. This time I'm going to click on the transform and add a scale property. And as before, we have a start keyframe and an end keyframe that have been created. So halfway, if I click halfway, where the line is, I want to increase the scale of this by, let's say, 3 times. There we go. Now what's happened, if I go back to 0 and press play, is we'll also have the animation rotating, but at the same time now, the object will increase and decrease in scale, as the halfway point was 3 times the size, and the 1 second keyframe at the end was left alone at the original scale. So if I press play now, we have a rotating and scaling cube spinning around. So let's imagine how you could use this just for fun. If you guys completed the mini side project that I gave you at the end of the last video, where you were supposed to have created your own little car or your own little train just from primitive objects, now what you could try and do is maybe make the wheels turn or make the car move around a little bit. And just get familiarize yourself with the animation panel down at the bottom. Now don't worry if you mess something up. If you click on a keyframe and want to remove it, you can simply hit delete. If you want to speed up or slow down the animation, you can click the keyframes and drag them from right to left, just like so. And you can manipulate the different properties. Don't forget, right at the end though, whatever you do, to come out of record mode. Now before I do that, I'm just going to add one more property, and this time we'll change the position. So we've once again added another keyframe, and at 0 I want it to be at the start position. At, let's say, the 0.2 I'm going to move the cube over to the left. At 0.4 I'm going to move it over to the back in the center. And notice I didn't move it to the left first. So what's happening is it will go to this position and then shoot across. And then right at the end, it will come all the way back to 0, where it first originally started. So if I press play now, it's going to spin around and zoom all over the place. a little bit too quick for my liking. So what we can do is change the sample rate to say 30, which will half the speed. There we go. Or I could increase the overall keyframes to be a lot longer. Let's zoom out using the mouse button and just rejig this a little bit. Let's move you up to 20, you to 120, you to a minute, and you to say 40. And now we have the same gap here, and the transitions in the center have also remained the same, but a little bit quicker. So we're going to get some funky little action going on now, but it should be slower than before. I'll drop the keyframes back to 30 and press play. And there we go. Look, we've got like a floating, flying around, rotating cube that's scaling in between, but we can't really tell based on the perspective too much. Let me just double check the scale. Yep, it is still going up to 3. Maybe I could make it bigger now. Let's make it 13 instead of 3. Nice and big. And now we're getting a huge cube. So you can see how the perspective from where we're sitting, rather than looking through the camera, is being manipulated as the distance of the cube moves away from us. Even though we increase the scale, then we can see the perspective, and we couldn't really tell that the cube was growing so much. Now let's come out of play mode here and stop the animation. Go back to the start and click the main camera. Now while the main camera is selected, we can see the cube here, and this is the camera preview, and it's also known as the game view. Now the game tab is up here next to the scene, and it's the next panel I want to show you. This is how it will look on a PC, Mac, or mobile device or console, depending on what the ultimate output of this project is. And this is what we will see through the camera. Now, if I press play, because the cube has an animation on it, we can see that animation in action as if we were looking through the camera. There we go, look. So this is how the game mode can perceive the animation working. Where we were previously is in the scene mode, and we can still move around. But you notice that the game mode is just through the camera itself. On the right hand side, I have this panel, which if you don't, they are just the stats. You can click these and toggle them on and off. And that will give us things like the sample frames per second, which is currently 114, based on the spec of the machine I'm on and how complex the scene is for what objects are being rendered in front of the camera. Okay, so that is the animation panel and the game panel. The last panel I want to show you on the basics of the workspace is the lighting panel. Now, if you can't see lighting here, it's window rendering lightings, and that's here, and I've just docked it across to the side. I'll just grab my camera and move me across. There we go. On the new version, my box looks a little bit darker, so if I click generate lighting, oh, I'll save the scene first. Yep, there we go. I can regenerate the lighting. The scene can be the sample scene. Replace you. There we go. And my cube has gone back to the correct white space. Now, why is a cube white? Well, first thing is it doesn't have any materials applied to it, and we'll look at that in a later video. But originally, all we have as a sun source or a light source is this directional light here. Now, if I click the directional light and we look at the inspector, we can see that the color is kind of a yellow color. Now, if I add a couple of extra objects, let's add a 3D plane, and I'll just lower you down underneath the cube so we can cast a shadow. There we go. Move around slightly. You can see how if I change the color on the light source to, let's say, a red or a green, 1 second, just make it a bit stronger, look, you can see how the lighting is changing, inclusive of the shadows, to represent the different light source color that I'm providing. So if you want to have a bit of a disco scene, that's how you'll do that. Okay, let's add a third object into the scene. Let's create a sphere, and move you back. There we go. And I'm just going to duplicate the plane. If you remember, I right click and duplicate. And here's the x-axis. So if I want to stand the plane up, let's rotate 90 on the x, minus 90, sorry. There we go. And now we can see how objects can cast shadows against the back wall, look, in between. And there are a lot of built-in lighting effects and physics systems that handle this kind of thing inside Unity automatically. So let's click on the directional light and change the type of light from being a directional to, say, a spotlight, and look at how the lighting changes. There we go. Now we have a spotlight. Now a spotlight works more like a torch, where, as you can see, depending where I position this, things will come in and out of shot based on where the light source actually is. Now if you can't see this, I want you to go across to lighting and click auto generate underneath the lighting, which, if you have any problems, you can always uncheck this, but every time we add or remove game objects, it will try to regenerate the lighting in real time, just so that we can see the immediate effects. Now, how about we want to see both the cube and the sphere at the same time? Well, as with any other object, now that we've changed the type of light from a directional to a spotlight, we can now change the rotation of the light, and we have a few additional properties. We have the intensity, so I can increase the intensity, and we can also change the shadow type from being soft to hard, and we can change the strength, the quality, and we can also grab a hold of these and increase the spotlight angle and size, which you can do here as well if you wish. So now we have a green light. Now let me show you how we can combine two. If I add a normal directional light, go to light, directional light, here is the sunlight once again. But if I zoom in, look, we can see that we also have the effects of the green light that are from the spotlight here. And we now have two objects. What's known as the gizmo, the 3D symbol, is different to represent the different types of light sources. So what about if we want to have a little bit of light so we can see where we're going, but we want to use a spotlight, for example, like a shock horror game, for example? Well, we can change the directional light so the intensity is much lower, like so. There we go. And now we can see both. You can always check this by looking through the game mode. There we go. And let's imagine that we'd applied some materials to this to make it look like a stone surface or a grungy looking dungeon or something like that. Then we can now see how the spotlight can, if I just decrease the angle, there we go. We can imagine how the spotlight could be looking around on the scene by changing the position like so, and you could be searching for something in the game. So we'll look at how we can actually connect the light sources to cameras and manipulate that kind of thing later on. All I wanted to do in this brief video is just introduce you to the rest of the panels, the animation panel and how we can control that, the lighting panel and how we can add different types of lights. There are more than two. I've just showed you two for now, just to not overflow you with information. But I want you to have a bit of a play now. I want you to try and change the look and appearance of the scene using lighting and the position of the light, and then maybe make things move around at the same time. Now, if you want a little side project once again, then why not animate the spotlight to move around? And I'll give you a bit of a pointer. If I just click my spotlight, I'm just going to click twice slowly to rename it as spot. There we go. While it's selected, as we did, I'll just put myself back in the corner. There we go, and grab you back out. Okay, nice and neat. We can now create an animation here called Spotlight. And let's imagine that we had a light on the roof that was being affected by the wind, for example. Then we could make it start up here before I've clicked record, and click record, add a property, change the rotation, and let's make it maybe halfway through. Rotate the camera, the spotlight, sorry, down here, and I'll leave it at that and leave you guys to press play to see what the effect is. Okay, fantastic. I'll see you in video 4 where we continue learning the basics of Unity 2019.